We're joined now by Wilbur Ross. Mr. Secretary, good morning.
Good morning.
Let's talk a little bit about aerospace and how aerospace is going to play a role in the trade narrative that the president is so keen to pursue at the moment. Does Europe need to spend more on American aerospace?
Well, Europe does need to spend more. Europe really should be living up to its 2% commitment to defense spending as part of the whole NATO arrangements. Aerospace is thriving. U.S. is the world's largest exporter of aerospace. Over $140 billion a year, roughly 70% of our whole industry is export industry. So it is a very, very powerful driver helping reduce our trade deficit. We make the best and most advanced products in the world.
In terms of how big that gap is, like how big do you see it being at the moment? How much more does Europe need to do?
Well, 2% of the total EU budget is a pretty big number. They've already increased by almost 100 billion. And so there's more to come because some of the wealthier countries like Germany are still way below the 2%.
Does this overlap with the president's concerns about the German auto industry? How do the two things fit together in your mind in terms of balancing the books a little bit more? The president is clearly very much of the mind that Europe needs to do more. How does the aerospace situation overlap with the auto?
Well, it overlaps in that a lot of them want to be compatible with NATO. It only makes sense to have your overall defense force and your local domestic one be simpatico, have interchangeability, have intermobility. So there's an inherent industrial logic to it. But also it's only fair. Even with them spending 2%, when they get to it, we're spending over 4% in the U.S. So it isn't that we're not doing our share. We're prepared to do quite a bit more relatively and absolutely than Europe. We just think they ought to step up to their share.
We're trying to understand. The question that we often ask here in Europe is trying to get our arms around understanding where the president is going with auto tariffs. Is your expectation that auto tariffs from the United States against Europe can be avoided? Is this something that you anticipate can happen, or do you think that that is becoming almost increasingly inevitable?
Well, the president made clear at the G7 meeting in Canada that his ultimate objective is no tariff barriers, no non-tariff barriers, no subsidy, no disrespect for intellectual property rights, but a true free trade environment. The problem we have with Europe is the European leaders talk free trade and practice extreme protectionism. We would like their rhetoric to be matched by their behavior. U.S. is the freest trading nation in the world, and we have the trade deficits to show for it.
What advice are you giving the president, though?
Well, the president we've already got a formulated trade policy, so it isn't like inch by inch. Situation with Europe right now is a little complex in that you just had the European parliamentary elections, haven't yet picked a new president for the European Commission, haven't yet decided who the trade commissioner will be. So it's a little bit hard to negotiate when you're not sure who the counterpart will be. It'll likely be early fall before that gets resolved. Also, under the European system, the trade commissioner needs to get a mandate from all the European member states. That may take a little while to do. It took Commissioner Malmström about 7 months to get even a limited mandate after President Juncker came to Washington.
Let's turn our attention to what's happening with China. Is your base case, Wilbur Ross's base case, that a deal can be done with China?
Well, I think eventually we'll have a deal with China, but I don't think it will come directly, out of the G20. G20 is a 40,000-foot level kind of discussion. So the main thing that could come out would be an agreement on principles for how to move forward. That's the most that could come.
The concern that the markets will have, the financial markets will have, is they will look at a deal like that and say, is this sustainable? Is this something that I can get a degree of certainty of? What you're telling me by the sounds of things is that would be a deal that has a low degree of certainty around it. Am I interpreting what you're saying correctly?
Well, you never have a deal on anything until you have a deal on everything. So
right.
In that sense, with things as complicated as trade negotiations, there's always going to be a degree of uncertainty until you really get to the finish line. And I know business hates uncertainty. I hated it when I was in business. But the real world is a world filled with uncertainty.
Do you think that's going to be something that business has to just deal with from now on? Is the degree of uncertainty around the trade narrative just going to be elevated for a much more...
No, I feel to the contrary. This administration, you should judge above all others by results. There was a lot of screaming and yelling, oh, NAFTA, we shouldn't renegotiate NAFTA.
Yep.
Now we've come out with USMCA, generally regarded as a far superior deal to NAFTA. So all those complaints, all that angst was a big waste of time. People should have a little more confidence. Similarly, people were saying, don't renegotiate with Korea. Well, we did, and it worked.
Okay. Wilbur Ross, thank you for your time this morning. Very much enjoyable to talk to you here at the Paris Air Show.